Hi, I'm 5 Pound Pete, and today I'm going to be talking about the insulation system I'm using in my ultralight van build. There's two different kinds of sound insulation you like. You want sound insulation so your van is quieter, and you want insulation from heat. I'm more concerned about heat than cold. I have a heater, but I don't have an air conditioner, and so I'm really concerned about heat getting into the van and trying to keep the van cooler. So the first layer, my system has 8 layers. Not that onerous when you get into it. The first layer in my system is white paint. Before I even bought the van, I realized, we go park out in Moab for bike rides. You want a white van. You want to be able to reflect as much radiated heat off that van before it can get into the interior of the van, where you have to mitigate it with all the rest of the solutions. So it's simple enough, but picking the right color for your van can make a huge difference in reducing the amount of heat that gets into the van. The second layer is butyl mat. This material is really sticky, and you apply this to the interior wall of the van so that vibration of the van doesn't generate any sound coming into the van. You want to minimize that vibration. So this is the second layer. It's applied with a roller to make sure that you get a really good contact between all the surface of the butyl material and the wall of the van, and that helps. The third and fourth layers of my solution is Thinsulate. This is a fantastic product for my solution. It has a fabric backing and fuzzy stuff on the front. When you apply this into your van, you want to make sure you apply the backing to the wall of the van and not the other way around. And it'll become apparent when we discuss air gaps. I apply this with a pretty aggressive adhesive, and I cover not only the panels of the van, but all the exposed metal of the van. Anything that's mechanically contacting the outside of the van, if the van outside's cold or hot, the energy propagates through all that through conduction, and a lot of those surfaces are going to be hot or cold, independent of what you do inside the van. So everywhere that I can, I'm covering not only the wall panels, which I'm discussing here, but all the surfaces, metal surfaces of the interior of the van. So the other side of the van, this material, is the fuzzy stuff. And the fuzzy stuff does a great job of cutting down on convection cooling. As air is flowing around inside the wall, convection can cool one side and transfer that, or heat the air and transfer that heat to the other side of that cavity. So the fuzzy stuff does a great job of cutting down on convection heating. What this doesn't do very well is anything to reduce radiated heat. Basically, infrared goes straight through this stuff. As a demo, here's a piece of the fuzzy stuff, and you can see that basically light just passes right through it. It means infrared's going to pass right through it, and so it doesn't do any good, or very little, if any, to reduce radiated heat. So to reduce that radiated heat and keep it from the inside of the van, you want to reflect it back into the fuzzy stuff and then out through the van. A lot of people use Reflectix. It's a fantastic product, but it has no mechanical advantage, strength to help with the walls. So what I'm using instead is a rigid foam product that has a reflective layer integrated into the product. And so the air gap between the fuzzy stuff and the reflective surface allows infrared light to hit the reflective surface and bounce back. You'd never want to just take a reflective surface and glue it to something that doesn't transfer heat or infrared, because there's no place for it to reflect into. So the fuzzy stuff acts as a really good way to give you an air gap so that the infrared light hitting the reflective surface bounces right back out of the van. So this is layer number 5, and it serves the purpose of reflecting that infrared back outside the van. It's also a fairly hard surface, and so any sound that comes through gets reflected off of this surface and bounced back into the fuzzy stuff. And the fuzzy stuff is actually a really good sound absorber. And so these all work together to both reduce sound and heat from getting into the van. The foam itself is also a sound absorber. And so, sound doesn't pass through this material very easily. And that's a good thing. So now I've got the next layers of my solution, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 are this foam. Layers, what I'm doing, it's not a very strong material, wouldn't work for a wall of a van. But what I'm going to do is glue it to a piece of 1/10 inch wide plywood. I did some experimenting with this material, and it turns out that if you take a piece of this material, this is the metal side, and you try to bend it down, it doesn't bend very well because the aluminum doesn't stretch. On the other hand, the plastic on the other side, if you try to bend it up, it flexes quite a bit. And so it's not super strong. But if you glue that plastic side to a piece of material that doesn't stretch, all of a sudden this becomes a very stiff material. It's a composite that becomes really stiff. And so that was my theory. I actually built up a prototype of a wall panel with the plywood on the outside and the rigid foam reflective surface on the inside. And independently, the plywood is super flexy, has no strength whatsoever. And the foam only has strength in one dimension. But when you glue them together, you end up with this composite material that is unbelievably strong and way strong enough to use for the walls or the ceiling in your van. And so this is what I'm going to use in my van. I've calculated that I can panel the entire interior of my van for about 50 pounds. And you compare that with plywood or tongue and groove wood, it's just a tiny fraction of the amount of wood, weight that you would use otherwise. So this is a great solution for making wall panels for an ultralight van build. Okay, and so now I've got the wall panel that's faced with plywood. The problem with this plywood, or another solution to in the system, is the plywood's pretty hard. And so if this is the interior wall of your van, sound that you produce inside the van or that gets inside the van bounces off this stuff, and it just bounces around inside the van and turns it into an echo chamber, which I didn't want. I wanted a really quiet van. So the next layer of my solution, which is layer 8, is fabrics that I'm going to put up onto the plywood. For the walls, I'm using this tweed fabric. It's quite attractive. It's soft and really plush, but it has all kinds of little chambers and fibers, and it does a phenomenal job of absorbing sound. And so this is layer 8 of using this tweed fabric. For the ceiling, I'm using a headliner. This material has a really lightweight cloth front and over 1/8 of an inch of really soft foam laminated to it. You put this on the ceiling and sound hits this. It's just an incredible sound absorbing material. it has the added benefit for me for comfort is that I have no headroom in my van. And so if I had a hard surface on the ceiling, believe me, it's not comfortable to bang into that hard surface. But with this headliner, if I hit the ceiling, I barely even feel it. The difference in comfort is night and day. And so in addition to being a good sound absorber, it's a good shock absorber for my head. And so this is great. The third material that I'm going to apply to this plywood is a marine vinyl. The marine vinyl is going to be used for the doors. If you use the cloth in the doorways and it's raining, the cloth gets wet, the plywood gets wet, and it's just not a good situation. So this waterproof vinyl is going to be used on all the doors. And so when rain hits it, it just runs off, it dries up, and you don't have any kind of problem. Okay, so the three different fabrics that are going to get applied to the interior of the plywood in my wall panels and ceiling panels. So this kind of concludes the technical description of my 8-layer insulation for an ultralight van build. I want to talk about two other things. When you apply the butyl material to the wall in your van, I didn't want to use an excessive amount of material. So most people take about a 25% rectangle, put it in the middle of a panel, and that's their solution. I did an experiment where I tried that and hit it, and it's pretty good, you know, at reducing the vibration. And then I thought about where's the vibration going, and so I made using the same amount of material, I did a plus pattern, and it didn't work as well. It's like, okay. And then I thought, you know, the vibration in a square panel may just bounce all kinds of places. And so I tried the starburst pattern that's shown here, and it's a little more work to cut more, you know, the material, same amount of material, but you have to cut it and apply it with multiple pieces. But to my ear, it actually seemed like it did a better job. And so that's what I'm using on all the other quarter panels in my van. I strongly suggest that you don't copy it without doing your own experiment. It's more work to do it, and so I would suggest that you do, you know, the rectangle and the starburst in your van with your kind of metal, and try it out and see if it makes a difference, and if so, you know, is it worth the extra work it takes to take advantage or not of that solution. Okay, so just a, you know, word of advice. The other thing that wasn't apparent in my, I did another video on my solar panel installation. And in that video, I talked about how I'm using Velcro standoffs to keep the solar panels lifted off of the surface of the van. As you can see, the majority of the surface of my van are these giant black panels that are, you know, suck up a lot of energy. I didn't want all that heat going into the van. So these little Velcro standoffs are a good insulator, and they keep from conducting that heat into the roof of the van. Now, from this discussion, you can also appreciate that with an air gap between the panel and the surface of the van, the white paint that's on the top of the surface of the van can reflect that infrared that's generated from those panels back away from the van. So in addition to, you know, not conducting heat, that air gap allows us to reflect the heat back out of the van into the panels where it gets dissipated into the atmosphere. And so that kind of is the end of my presentation here. I encourage you to go to my channel and look at some of the other ultralight van build videos that I have posted. And maybe you can you know, take some ideas from this discussion and use it for your own panels, or take ideas from those other videos to improve your van build. So thank you for watching, and Good luck on your van build.